Hi, everybody. This is Ramin Azarm, licensed clinical social worker and owner and operator of Flex to Success Clinical Rehabilitation Services. And today I'm going to do a video on parental favoritism. This is a hot topic amongst many of my peers, close associates, patients, and just fair weathered friends. I decided to do a video on this because it has come up recently in therapy sessions that I've been doing with patients, and it's actually been coming up a lot, and I've been forced to address it because if not, then it seems like families were going to be in strife and fighting and at each other's throats for a pretty significant amount of time with a very, very high intensity. So, without further ado, let's get right to the topic. So, parental favoritism is basically the unfair treatment where one parent or both parents tend to favor one particular child over another child. And there's many different ways that this can happen. So it could be buying more materialistic gifts for one child than they do the other child. It could be giving one child a significant amount of more attention than giving another child. It could be showing up to events for one child while neglecting another child's events and achievements. It could be, just, giving basically giving one child more time, energy, and attention than another child. So, what are some things that parental favoritism can cause? Well, first off the bat, if you look at some studies that are out, one particular I read by Linda Dervis is low self esteem. So the child who's not favored tends to have lower self esteem over time. And one of the reasons for that is that when they're not getting attention, they start to blame themselves. Like they start to look at themselves and say, maybe there's something wrong with me that my parents aren't giving me as much attention as they're giving my brother or sister. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe there's maybe I'm the dumb one. Maybe I'm the ugly one. Maybe I'm the fat one. Maybe I'm the stupid one. Whatever the case may be, whatever tape is playing inside the sibling's head, they're trying to find some type of justification for the lack of time, energy, and attention. So, one of the things that does is it lowers an individual's self esteem because they start to question themselves in a negative manner, trying to find a reason for why this is going on. Another thing is poor social connections. So, as we know from basic psychology 101, when we're growing up, if we don't get a sufficient amount of attention from our parents, social situations in the future become much more difficult. And the reason for that is, the attention that we get from our parents is our first concept, our first idea of what it's like to socialize. So that initial interaction between our parents sets the foundation for all of our social relationships moving forward throughout the lifespan. So if we don't have a good relationship with our parents and that foundation isn't built from the beginning, then social relationships from that point forward become extremely complicated, very difficult, and often awkward. Um, another another effect of parental favoritism is anxiety. So, when you're unsure of yourself in social situations, one of the things that can happen is that you can obtain something called performance anxiety. I counsel a lot of people that have performance anxiety, whether it be trying to perform at a job, trying to engage in public speaking events, trying to mentor people, trying to perform any type of task. They will get oftentimes performance anxiety, and that can be a direct result of parental favoritism. So, being awkward socially, most jobs require some level of socialization, unless you work in like a warehouse where you're just like a machine and you're just like, maintaining like parts or products like in a factory. most of the time you're going to have to engage in some type of social behavior in order to perform a task. If you have low self esteem and social awkwardness, chances are that's going to start to give you anxiety because people are going to pick up on that and then they're going to expect you to improve. And it's going to be very difficult to improve because you have to make up that foundation that you were never given because the attention that you got from your parents was extremely poor. So now you have to try and make that up as an adult or as an older child when you have a job of your own and you have to function. And that can be very difficult. So it's important to note these things because parental favoritism can do some pretty significant damage to people if parents aren't aware of what they're doing and aren't monitoring how they're treating their other children. So it's very, very important that we keep a note of these symptoms and we do our best to make sure we're not engaging in any type of parental favoritism with our children. The next item that parental favoritism can create is sibling hatred or dislike between siblings. So when you see one sibling getting all the attention, it can create jealousy. It can create feelings of inadequacy, right? And then those feelings of inadequacy can lead to resentment. And a lot of times that resentment gets displaced towards the sibling who's getting all the attention. So just as an example, let's say there's a family with three girls and one boy. And the family kept having children because they wanted to have that one boy, right? That was the goal is okay, we have to have a boy. So they kept having kids and they were going to stop once they had a boy, but they ended up having three girls before they had the boy, right? And now this is a scenario that's very close to home because my own mother was actually involved in a situation where she had her two sisters and her were born before her parents had a boy. So once they had a boy, the boy was favored. And what that basically did was it caused the three girls to want to gang up on the boy and give the boy a hard time because they felt resentful of the fact that he was getting all the attention. Now you can sit back and look at that situation. Oh yeah, that's common sense, blah blah blah. But you know what? That wasn't just hard for the three girls, that was hard for the boy too. Because now he has a disturbing relationship with his three siblings because his parents are giving him attention. And since he's a kid, he's not really able to put this all together to figure out what's really going on. So he just thinks that his sisters hate him. So now his perception of his sisters is that, oh, these are horrible people. Because look at the way they're treating me. I'm not even doing anything to them. And they're treating me like shit, right? So this is a big issue with parental favoritism. It creates tension and hatred and dislike amongst the other siblings because one sibling's getting all the attention, which causes the other siblings to get jealous, and then they displace that anger and jealousy towards the sibling who's getting the attention instead of the source, which is the parents who are not being responsible in the way that they're parenting and allowing this to happen. Another item that is acquired when there is parental favoritism is depression. So we all know that anger is a secondary emotion, and once anger subsides, usually what's behind that anger is sadness. And excessive sadness leads to depression. So it is very common for people to have depression when they have been the product of being the non favored child in a family. Poor self esteem, all these different things, create these feelings of inadequacy, which ultimately lead to depression. And the depression, depending on how intense the parental favoritism is, can be pretty significant. So you can have mild depression to severe depression and anywhere in between. Another item is anger issues. So we kind of touched on that before. So yeah, I mean, the anger can be towards the sibling. The anger could be towards yourself once you're an older adult. The anger could be, oh, I wish I was the favored one. Why do I have to be such a loser? How come my parents didn't favor me? So that the anger can actually be turned inward towards yourself because you weren't the sibling that was favored the most. So anger is pretty complex in this situation and can be displaced in a number of different places. It could be even displaced towards a husband or a spouse, right? Or a wife, because let's say you're the non-favored sibling. Now you get older, you marry someone, and you realize from meeting your husband's family or your wife's family that they're the favored sibling. So now you're angry at them. Why? Because they reminded you of the fact that you were the non-favorite sibling, because they're the favorite sibling in their family, and now it brought everything back up for you again, all your past stuff, right? So there could be an element of trauma here where you get like, the scabs get ripped open, and the band-aids get ripped off, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, by the way, you happen to marry me, and I'm the favorite sibling in my family, so sucks that you weren't, and it creates all types of anger issues. So the anger can even be displaced towards a spouse. Another item is lack of assertiveness. When we have low self esteem, there's a very, very high chance that we aren't going to be very assertive. We're going to take a back seat. If we're the scapegoat in the family and we're taking on all the negative reactions to events or things that have happened, because we're the scapegoat and we're the easy person to beat up in those situations because we just take it and we don't respond, right? So the scapegoat in family settings can definitely have a lack of assertiveness, feeling inside themselves, feeling extremely introverted and unwilling to speak their mind for fear of ridicule, for fear of being told to shut up, for fear of, you know, um, their say not being heard or not being valued enough to be accepted, which is very common when parents show favoritism towards one sibling. A lot of times, the non favorite sibling, when they say something, it kind of goes unnoticed and unacknowledged. So then that sibling over time learns that, oh, my say doesn't matter, so what's the point of being assertive? So then you end up with a lack of assertiveness over time. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is a chronic state of uncertainty or indecisiveness. So that kind of goes along with a lack of assertiveness, but basically being indecisive. So every time you made a decision when you were, part of your family and you were the non-favorite sibling, every time you made a decision, it was nobody cared. Nobody supported you. Nobody helped you. Nobody went out of their way to make sure you were able to follow through on your decision. So then what happens is you don't want to make a decision. A lot of times you can be ridiculed for your decisions as well. So then what does that do? That makes you say, okay, I don't want to make a decision, because every time I make a decision, it's a problem, right, with my family. Every time I make a decision about something, every time I try to stand up for myself, every time I think I'm knowledgeable about a particular subject and I speak up about it at the dinner table, I get shut down. And then my favorite sibling, who doesn't really know much about the subject matter, can basically say anything ridiculous and my parents just support it. And whatever I say is just out the window. So now I don't even want to, I don't even feel certain about what I'm saying. I don't even feel decisive about what I'm saying, because I was never supported anytime I had made a decision or anytime I had taken a certain position on something. I was never given that parental support to reinforce my decisions and certainty. So then you end up with a lack of certainty and a lack of decisiveness. So why do parents engage in parental favoritism? Well, sometimes it's because they find common ground with one particular child over another child. So, as an example, let's say there's a dad who's really into sports, and his firstborn son is really into sports just like him, but his secondborn son wants to be a gamer and only likes indoor activities. What do you think's going to happen? Or what do you think could potentially happen in that situation? Since the dad loves sports and has another son that loves sports, he's going to spend more time, energy, and attention with the son that likes sports because they have like interests. And if he's not monitoring the way he's parenting, he's going to favor one child over the other child. And then the child who likes indoor sports is going to think that his dad hates him, or doesn't want to spend time with him, or doesn't care about his interests, or doesn't care about him. And then that child feels left out in everything that they're doing. And if they're, when they're a child and they're growing up, they need that parental attention. They need that support. And if they don't have it, now his self esteem is shot. So now he's like, oh, I'm a loser. I'm a loser. My dad doesn't like what I do. I'm a bum. You know, I hate my life. Life sucks. I don't want to be alive anymore. I want to be dead. I mean, sometimes it can get that intense where the depression is so deep, it becomes so severe that the person feels like, what's the point of being alive anymore? My parents don't want me. They never wanted me. I'm a gamer. I'm great at gaming. I make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, let's just say, doing gaming, but the parents don't care. All they care about is sports. And, Bobby's into sports, so let's spend all our time with him. Okay, well, you can see how that dynamic can be extremely dysfunctional and create a lot of problems for the sibling who's not favored in that situation. So it's very important if you are a parent and you find common ground with one child, you have to monitor how much time, energy, and attention you're spending with that child who has a like interest with you. Because if you're not being fair about it, it's going to create a rift. It's going to create a rift in your relationship with the non-favorite child, and it's going to create a rift in the relationship between that child, that non-favorite child, and his favorite sibling. So another reason why parents engage in parental favoritism is a lack of awareness or ignorance. So, I had mentioned earlier that, it's important to monitor how much time, energy, and attention you're giving each child because you want to try and be fair as possible. So if you're not doing that and you're just oblivious to what you're doing, you'll just do it. You look, as humans, we have a tendency to connect to like interests, right? I like UFC. If I have 10 kids and only one of them likes the UFC and the rest of them hate it, I'm going to talk more with that one kid who likes the UFC if I'm not monitoring my behavior as a parent. I'm going to fall into that trap where I'm spending all my time with the one kid that likes what I like, and now all my other 9 children are getting neglected as a result. And how do you think they're going to feel about me? They're going to lose respect for me as the parent. And then when I have to try and parent those other 9 children and tell them what to do, because, either it's a safety issue or, for their own benefit, I'm telling them to do something for their own benefit so that they can be responsible young adults when they grow up, they're not going to want to listen to me. And they're probably going to write me off as, oh, yeah, well, why don't you go spend time with Johnny? Because that's all you guys do is talk about UFC. You don't even care about us, right? So this is the type of uncomfortable dynamics that can develop when you're engaging in parental favoritism and you're unaware and ignorant to what you're doing. So be aware of how you're parenting and how much attention you're giving each one of your kids. Another thing that can cause issues with parental favoritism or lead to parental favoritism is cultural norms. So there are certain cultures, like Middle Eastern culture, that are very patriarchal and they are very like man dominated. So the man is the head of the household, the man is the most important, boys, 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 everything is boys, and girls are kind of left by the wayside. They're just there to like cook and clean and you know, there are cultures that have had this in their foundation, of being a patriarchal culture. And then there are also cultures where they're matriarchal and, the mom is like the head of the household and she runs the home and you better listen to what mom says or you're in big trouble, right? So depending on which culture you come from could dictate, whether the females are favored or the males are favored. It can create a gender disparity. So if you come from a culture that's patriarchal, you want to make sure that despite your culture, you're giving equal fair treatment to each sibling. So you have to be even more aware when you come from a culture like that you're being fair. Because if not, what's going to happen is you're going to give all the attention to the boy if it's a patriarchal, or you're going to give all the attention to the girls if it's a matriarchal. And in both situations, one gender is going to be left out if you have both genders of children, and that's going to create issues like we talked about before. So you definitely want to monitor that and be aware of that. Another reason is abnormal reactions when disliking the majority of behaviors from one child over another child. So this kind of goes back to what we talked about initially, like where one child's like a gamer, another child's into sports, and if you're a dad that dislikes a lot of the behaviors that one child is doing, take the time out to try and understand that child and why he likes those things. Be even more diligent, take even more time out for that child because you have this mental opinionated position that the things that one child's engaging in aren't that important. Take the time out to try and understand why that child likes those things, because once you realize why they like them, if you love your children, which I believe most parents do love their children, you'll be able to connect to that child. And you might even find out that you like indoor activities or gaming or whatever it is that you thought you didn't like. You might realize, hey, maybe I like these things more than I realized. Because now my son likes them, so now I'm getting into them, and now we have something to do. So, listen, we all have our likes and dislikes as people, but that shouldn't stop us from trying to connect to our children. So, if our children tend to like things that we don't particularly like, let's take the time out and try to understand those things because we love our children and we want our children to be happy. And that should be enough for us to step outside of our comfort zone and maybe get comfortable with something that we weren't initially comfortable with. Another reason why parental favoritism happens, I call this good intentions, poor application. So, a great example of this would be when you compare one child to another child. So oh, why can't you be more like Bobby? Bobby went to university and got a degree, and Bobby has a master's degree, and look how successful he is, and he's doing all these great things. Why couldn't you be more like Bobby? Right? A lot of times parents will do this. What that does is that makes the child who's not like Bobby feel like complete garbage. Okay? Don't do that. Don't compare one child to another child and say, why can't you be more like him? Because you know what that's basically saying? I like him more than I like you. So change. How do you think a kid's going to react to that who's sensitive? They're going to be like, oh, great. So dad just basically told me he likes Bobby more than me. You know what? Fuck dad. That's how the kid's going to react. And if he doesn't react like that, you know what he's going to say? Man, I really love dad, and dad loves Bobby more than me, and now I really feel like garbage, and maybe I'm just not going to come out of my room for a month. Maybe I'm going to cut myself for a little while. Maybe I'm going to run away from home because nobody likes me here anyway, and I'm not favored and I'm not wanted. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know what thoughts are going to go through your child's head. You don't know how sensitive they are. You don't know how intense their hormones are raging when they're going through adolescence. Like, we're not inside our children's bodies to be able to understand them to that specific level. So don't just assume that you know and that you can say whatever you want and the kid's just going to take it and deal with it. Be cautious and careful with how you speak to your children, and don't compare ever. There's no reason to ever do that. Every child is different, and there's no reason to compare one child to another child. Trust me, that child who is fucking up or maybe doing things differently, he's already comparing himself to his sibling. You don't need to do it too. They don't need to hear it from the person that they look up to. Okay, that child's already comparing himself to his sibling and trying to compete and do the best he can to either catch up or make moves so he can be at the same level. So don't make it worse by highlighting it and making that child feel like crap about themselves. All right? Another thing is opinions that one is weaker than another and needs more attention. So sometimes parents do this. They'll say, well, Samantha has issues and, she tends to be really sensitive and weak a lot of the time. So, we have to give her more attention than we give, I don't know, Sally, right? So, okay, fine. But here's the problem with that. That's your opinion. And Samantha might be much more resilient than you realize. And by taking attention away from Sally and giving it to Samantha, what you're basically telling Sally is, yeah, you don't need as much attention or love from us because you're more independent. So we're going to starve you from attention and love and give it to Samantha because she's more in need, which means you're going to be left out. So you're going to be left out for Samantha. Okay, that is like the same thing. Like that's going to lead to parental favoritism. And now you're even justifying it by making this opinionated statement that, oh, this child's weaker than the other child, so it's justified. Well, that's not justifying it for the other child who's not getting the attention. All that's basically doing is saying, okay, we've made this decision. We don't have any supporting arguments or basis for why we did it. It's just how we feel. And because of that, you're going to get less attention. So deal with it. Okay. Well, now I'm going to feel like crap about it because where am I supposed to get that attention from now? If I'm not getting it from the people who I respect and care about the most, my parents, then who am I supposed to get it from? Maybe I'll get it from gang members on the street. Maybe gang members on the street will give me more attention than you're giving me. So now I'm caught up in gangs because you wanted to give Samantha more attention than you gave Sally. You see how this can create a dysfunctional dynamic? So you want to be careful of saying things like that, like this child is weaker, or this child needs more attention, or this child has this condition. No, no, no. All children are created equal and are given equal treatment, regardless of what their issues are. That's how it has to be. And if that's not enough, then get them services that make up for that more attention that they need. Don't be the favoring parent that favors one kid more than another kid. And that's very difficult to do, especially when you do have a child with a disability. The tendency is to want to give that child more attention. And in certain instances, you might have to, but you should be aware of it and say, okay, because I had to spend more time with Samantha on this day, on this other day, I'm going to balance it out by giving Sally more attention. And that way you try to, if Sally just sees that you're trying to keep things fair, she's going to maintain respect for you. She's going to still love you and she's going to understand you're doing the best you can. But if you're just blatantly justifying giving one child more than another child, it's a mess. So, one child can have more powerful personality than another child and monopolize situations. That's really frustrating. Parents have to be in control of their families. So, you can't allow one child to monopolize and dominate things just because they have a more powerful personality. This does happen. There are children out there with extremely powerful personalities, whether they're, born leaders or they're just alphas. Parents have to keep those kids in check. They can't allow those kids to just dominate everything. They have to keep things fair. It's your work and your responsibility and your duty as a parent to do this. You can't just leave things up to chance, and you can't just say, oh, the kid has a more powerful personality, so it is what it is. That's not going to cut it. It's going to lead to parental favoritism, and then all those negative aspects are going to come into play as a result of the favoritism. So be mindful of that. Also, when one child is extremely more successful than another child, that is another thing that can happen where you can fall into parental favoritism. So if one child is extremely successful, like an NBA basketball player or an NFL football player or a movie star, and they're like worth $215 million dollars and they're throwing parties all the time and they paid off their parents' house and bought their parents cars and took care of their siblings' debts, and that's all great, that's all fine and dandy, but guess what? Your job as the parent is to be fair despite all of those things that are going on. So if one child wants to be generous like that and buy things and pay for things, and that's all good and great, thank you so much. You don't have to do that, but if you want to, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, but I'm still going to give you the equal amount of attention that I'm giving all the other children, despite how successful you are and how much you're able to pay for, because money isn't everything. And we have to understand that kids have feelings. And just because one kid is more successful than another kid doesn't mean that we have to shift all our attention to the successful kid because he's the most successful. Okay? Congratulations, you caught a break. You became super successful. You worked really hard. You put yourself in a position where you're, on top of the world right now financially. That's great. We love you, but we also love all the other kids the same. So, you know, now that you guys understand how parental favoritism can happen and what are some of the long term effects of parental favoritism, let's talk about how you can avoid it. So, one way that you can avoid parental favoritism is not comparing children to other children, right? Not comparing children to their siblings. monitoring your behavior with your children to promote fairness, communicating clearly with all your children. So, anytime you do something for one child, communicating why you did that and how you're going to make it fair. That's super important. Don't tolerate bullying among siblings. So if you see one sibling bullying another sibling, don't just look the other way because you tend to favor one sibling over another. Make sure you intervene and show that each child is important and nobody should be bullying anybody. Same rules for all children. And then another thing that you can watch out for, or you know, is when you write up your will, right? So when you're getting to the point where you're in your end days and you're about to pass away and you write up your will, make sure the inheritance that you leave for your children when you pass away is fair. Make sure your will is fair to all the children. Don't just leave one child a significant amount more than other child because you think one child's more responsible than another child, or you favor one child more than another child. This has created so many horrific, horrible, like tenuous, hateful, nasty fights amongst siblings when parents do this. I hate when I see this. And I get people in therapy all the time that are like, I can't believe my parents did this. It does happen, and it's unfortunate. No parent should be leaving one child like everything that they have while the other children don't get shit. Okay? Despite what you think about your other children and how responsible they are, or whatever the case may be fair. You know, every single one of your children are they're your blood, right? They're your legacy. Make sure you're leaving a fair amount of your things to all the children. I feel like that's your responsibility as a parent. Okay, you're leaving this world, you're moving on to a better place. Like, don't create tension amongst your children because you do something like that. Like, what is the point, really? Don't you want your children to get along with each other when you're gone? Isn't that important to you? It should be if it's not. Um, as a father, like you should want your children to treat their siblings like family. That's the importance of having a family. Everyone treats each other with, there's mutual respect for everybody in the family. That's super important. That level of fairness is, the glue that holds families together when their parents pass away. So don't be the parent that messes with that and creates tension amongst siblings, because what's going to happen is they're going to fight, and it's going to be nasty, and it's going to be mean, and people might excommunicate each other. Like, these things happen. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in session. So it's really ugly, and I don't want to see that. So make sure you don't do that. And that's my video for today on parental favoritism. If you guys have any questions or concerns, leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and tune in next time. Okay? Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.